Hello, Dumelang, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Motlhophi BUA, Voters Speak, an election podcast that is brought to you by Bokongo, that's the Botswana Council of Non-Governmental Organizations, in partnership with Duma FM and supported by the Embassy of the United States of America in Gaborone. And today we're going to be talking about the media's role in democratic governance. My name is Tumisa Mote, your host, and we're going to be delving into issues of how the media is able to shape public opinion during elections. We're going to be looking at how it's able to combat issues of misinformation, disinformation as well by extension, and we're going to just get to find out how we can build a more resilient media landscape in Botswana. Allow for me to introduce you to our guests here. I have Mayor Sonia Galibolai, who is coming from BCPI, and that is the Botswana Center for Public Integrity, as the Communications Research and Advocacy Manager. Hello to you, Sonia.
Good afternoon to you, Remote. It's actually Gaobolai. Yes, please.
Gaobolai, coming from BCPI.
Indeed.
I also have in the studio Mr. Aubrey Lute, who is an editor with Weekend Post. He's also a member of the Editors Forum. Relute.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Looking forward to the conversation.
Oh, yes. So we're going to be getting into issues that revolve around the media's role to shape opinions, like I'm saying, during a very critical period. They are consumed by the citizenry. Issues of propaganda or those who are peddling misinformation or disinformation. So we're going to be getting into the crux of it and getting to understand how we fare as a media or fourth estate mo Botswana. Sonia, Botswana Center for Public Integrity. The integrity of our media. Mo Botswana ka ha le banka teng le ka ha hongwe ga le bapisa ka teng ka ha re dirang ka teng mo Botswana le mahatsa mangwe gore how do we actually fare?
Okay, again, thank you for the invitation and of course having the discussion. I think as an opening, I would talk about the fact that, on a general view or perhaps globally, we've seen that in recent years, traditional media specifically has sort of faced criticism in terms of a seeming decline in their integrity, where now we see the rise of, issues of fake news, issues of, certain houses and or journalists being said to be bought off, the brown envelope sort of phenomenon. And the same is with Botswana. When you look at the kind of criticism that media has now, it is far more than back when in its early stages, and it's not necessarily unfounded criticism. We do find that more than ever before, there are situations where even sometimes the lack of integrity is as glaring as you seeing something that to not be factual, it being plastered all over reputable publications, so to speak, and it situations like that beg the question of are we that far gone? Of course, I'm not going to say that our media is at a point where everything should be, shut down. There is no need for them or they don't have a role to play anymore. But in terms of how you asked the issue of where are we do see that there are a lot more issues of integrity now than in the past, and some of those issues do hold water, because we can see, or it has been proven in certain instances, indeed, that either newspapers and or journalists are either agents of disinformation or misinformation as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Relute, your thoughts on that one? Se no gore se buiwa ke Sonia ha ka ha ka mbo be ga dikgambo ntse ka teng mo Botswana. Wena o bo le bajang as an editor, as somebody who has participated in the space and operated in the space for an extended period of time, o ka re a re mo lehelong le le botoka mo nakong ya gompieno re gadima ko morago re bapisa le ko re tswang teng a nako nne re le teng?
Thank you for having me in this discussion. I take it that it's a very opportune time to actually get Botswana to appreciate the role of the media, especially in the advent of the upcoming general election. The media in Botswana has grown in the past few years, albeit amidst challenges. Challenges that borders on ethical considerations, financial considerations, and of course just the general business consideration, because at the end of the day we are businesses. We are supposed to be profit making. We are supposed to create wealth for the shareholders like any other business. I'm putting up this foundation so that you understand that there will be inherent challenges
right
therein. Where you've got shareholders, where you've got people expecting profit, and when you've got an audience that expect credible information, there is likely to be what we call conflict of interest. And that conflict of interest now is the interesting part. How do you manage it? How do you ensure that it doesn't pollute that which you are supposed to be doing, your core mandate of disseminating factual, fair, impartial information, especially during a period as critical as this one, an election year. The media is critical in that it shapes opinions and it shapes narratives. And how are these done? There is what we call agenda setting in the media. This is where the competition is. This is where you find your politicians, your business people, even the journalists competing for that space to set the agenda, deciding what should be a matter for discussion, what should be on the front pages, what should be prime on TV, on radio. I introduced the word prime there because priming is also very critical, but in most instances you won't hear people talking about it. Priming actually addresses how you tone a story, how you angle a story, whether it's on TV, on the newspaper, on radio. It's very important to also understand that there's also what we call gatekeeping. I'm introducing this terms so that we understand that there's a process which we must try by all means as stakeholders to see how we influence it. There's also what we call representation. That one is very key because in representation, that is where we'll be able to assess as to whether all the groups are actually covered in the narratives. The public opinion that is being sprayed out there to the people, are all groups covered, whether it's your youth, whether it's your women groups, the disabled, in an election year, all these groups should be covered. All these groups, their issues should be covered, should be discussed somewhere or another, just to ensure that there is that fairness that we're talking about. But if I'm to scale,
e be re setse re utlwile mo go lona gore ke eng se ene gore se tshwana ke gore se baakangwe go netefatsa gore ga re tswelele ka go itemogela tsone dikgwetlho tsa go nna yana. Sonia, ke buditse ka the landscape gore ntse a mo nakong ya gompieno. Let's talk about public trust in the media as the fourth estate. Kana ga ke utlwa le hoko fourth estate le ga motho a reditse le buiwa gore go na le seriti sengwe se se tlang ka leina leo tlotlang e leng gore e hiwa bone ba leng gore they are members of that estate. So are we seeing that? Is that reflected in the citizenry gore ba na le tshepo ye leng gore e go godimo ya bobegadikgang re lebile gape mo nakong ye re leng mo go yone?
Well, I think on a general, I think from what I can observe, there seems to be a difference when you look at trust in the media across demographics. It seems that with perhaps the younger generation or the youth group, their trust seems to be more in the new age forms of media, That's where also we see the rise of citizen journalists. And, it seems that those are the kind of news sources that, when separated from traditional media, seem to endear more to the younger demographics. And then the older generation, having been around all this time of the development of traditional media, they seem to sort of still trust the traditional media more. I think even just hella at an ordinary everyday level, if you take a normal everyday family in Botswana, chances are that the adults of that household are the ones who are buying the print media. They are the one who are tuning into the 7 p.m. news bulletins, whether on radio, whether on TV, whereas the younger ones keep up with the news throughout the days from their more digital sources. But I think when we look at trust, the measurement of trust empirically, I would take you to the findings of the last Afrobarometer survey that was done in 2022. There was a question that spoke to asking people how much freedom they think the media has to do their job without fear or interference from external sources. The external sources of which were not named, but just how free do you think the media is to do their job? And almost 50% of people, I think it was about 47% of the respondents said, they are not at all or not likely to be free. And just slightly more people were saying, no, they are free to do that. So when you look at it in that way, it seems that, it's a concerning number, because it means those number of people that feel the media is not at all free or not free, they are unlikely to believe the news when they're presented to them. So that's the issue of trust. As much as they believe it's as a result of being threatened and or coerced and or influenced, but it means they are less likely to believe that what they are seeing is accurate and reflective of what is prevailing. So the issue of public trust, I think when it comes to the media and when it comes to government, which is the who the media is a watchdog against, or is watching, when we call the media the watchdog, those two entities are sort of facing a crisis of declining public trust. Although on a general, it seems that there are people who blame the government for their lack of trust in the media. Some blame the media itself for their lack of trust. But on a general, it seems that there is a mistrust of what is presented generally as the news.
Right.
Yeah.
The role of the media in democratic governance. Ke yone kgang e leng gore ra e seka-seka mo nakong ya gompieno le baeng ba me. Mme ka eletsa thata gore le wena o nne le seabe mo puisong ya rona ka go romela molaetsa mo 76281885, a WhatsApp message o e leng gore re tla o bala gone ga le gore o na le kakanyo nngwe e leng gore no eletsa gore e be re ka itebaganya le yone, kana o na le potso e leng gore o ka e lebaganya bone ba e leng gore ke na le bone mo tsatsing la gompieno. Re lute go hale o buile ka dikgang tsone tsa interference, tsa go sa nneng le kgololesego mo gongwe, tsa go kgotlela tsamaiso e leng gore e tla baka gore go se ka ga nna le what you call fair and unbiased coverage. Erra ke batla gore dintlha tseo re tle re di lebelle, re tsenye leitlho thata mo go tsone, gore jaanong ka diteng di ka tilwa ka tselentseng jang. Mme ebile gongwe o tlhalose sentle gore di ka tlhagelela di ntse jang mo bobega dikganyeng, segolobogolo ga re lebile press media yone e leng gore o direla ko go yone.
Ke a leboga. When you look at the media, you go back to just the foundation. Let's take an example of a journalism student. There's a core subject. I think at the University of Botswana it is worth 3 credits. It is called media ethics. It is the core of anybody who aspires to be a journalist. Because if you are an ethical, no matter how good you are with the language that is prescribed for a publication that will hire you, or a radio station that will hire you, a television station that will hire you, you'll never actually reach the level of a good or so-called journalist if you don't observe ethics. That is the foundation for any, because in fact it is our trading stock. I'll give you an example. I think Sonia made a very good point when addressing the issue of demographics. You look at the people who trust the press media today. I'll give you the case study of the Weekend Post, where I'm coming from. On an estimate, I would say 60 or so % of our readers are people who are over the age 45, and most of them have actually retired, because sometimes we do receive calls from somebody who is retired and they're based in Motlhophi. And in fact, it was my first time to hear about the village, Motlhophi. That old man was demanding that Weekend Post should reach that area because he's tired of going to Masonga to buy a copy. We gave him the option of actually subscribing for a digital copy, which he can access through his mobile. He told us no, he's not going to do that. He wants the hard copy. Because in our own brief survey that we've done, most of the disinformation, misinformation, fake news emanates from social media. The mistake that happens is that we've got journalists who are in our newsrooms who tend to make the mistake of over amplifying social media as a source, and they take that information and paste it on the traditional sources of media, which are your newspapers, your radio stations, your television stations. So it is very important that individual media houses should have policies, social media policies, as to how their journalists or reporters or announcers, whatever you may call them, depending on where they are, how they interact with the social media space, how they use information that is sourced from social media space. Because that is what has created the biggest problem for us, especially when it comes to the matter of fake news and misinformation or disinformation.
Ke batla go tsena ganong ka gore go na le ntlha e ke sa batleng ke e lebala ya gone gore bone ba ileng gore gongwe they are the stakeholders, beng ba metswedi ya bobegadikgang yone re buang ka yone, ke batho ba ileng gore gongwe ga ba heta ka yone course ya 3 credits. Ke batho ba ileng gore bone dikgatlhego tsa bone ke mo go lekeng go bona dipoelo.
Yes.
So re dira jang gore re ska ra tsena mo seemong se leng gore re itlhela motswedi mongwe wa dikgang o e langwe more kareng captured, right? It's a term that has become a buzzword now. Especially in the area in gore tshela mo go yone ya fake news, ya misinformation. So re netefatsa yang gore bone bao ga ba ete ba khotlela jaanong se leng tsamaiso ye lona le babega dikgang le ikemiseditseng gore le sale morago.
For instance, at the Editors Forum, we do emphasize that newsrooms must ensure that they have at least a gatekeeper who's well-resourced when it comes to ethics, when it comes to understanding issues around digital media, and of course what is happening today around AI, that is artificial intelligence. Because we are well alive to what is happening when it comes to the use of AI, the use of social media to spread fake news. In fact, it is not just strangers who are spreading fake news. In fact, it's reputable organizations, reputable political organizations, reputable people who actually want to benefit from the gullible lot, who are not even aware that there is what is called AI, just to give an example. So it is very important that as the media, we move along with the times. Our policies do address these new phenomena, so that we also induct and equip our reporters, our staff, with relevant knowledge with these new forms of media and new tools such as AI. So it is very important that we are alive to this. But one critical element, which I think we often just ignore as a country, even just around the world really, what is called media literacy. Media literacy doesn't talk to me or speak to me as a journalist, as Aubrey. Media literacy speaks to the audience. Am I producing this program for an informed audience? Is the audience that I'm producing this content for media literate? She spoke to an Afrobarometer study from 2022. I'm aware of it, that study. I remember I had a discussion with someone and I was asking the person I was with, to what extent is the sample that was used to come up with that opinion, which ranged between 43-47%, to what level was it informed about the role of the media and how the media is supposed to work? And of course, the inherent issues that actually surround the media. To what extent was that audience informed?
Sonia, ke letsa gore ke gogele mo puisanyong ya rona go builwe dilo tse dintsi. Ultimately re batla go tlhaloganya gore seabe sa bobegadikgang se ntse jang mo go lekeng gore se netefatse gore sepela se leng gore se tswa mo metsweding ya bobegadikgang ke se leng gore se tlhotlhilwe ke se leng gore it's fair and unbiased. So fair and unbiased coverage is what we're looking for. But we're looking for that in a sea of disinformation, fake news, the prevalence of propaganda and misinformation. So ho ka dirwa jang gore re netefatse gore se rona re eletsang re le babegadikgang go se ntshetsa kwa ntle se tswa se sa khotlelwa ke sepe kana ga ile gore se khotleletswe ke sengwe ebe ba ileng gore they are the consumers of that information ba ka khona go lemoga gore se ileng gore ba se bala kana se ileng gore ba se lebeletse ke se eseng sone kana se sena le tshokamo.
Well, I think when we zone in into specifically election period, the role of the media doesn't necessarily change. It just becomes all the more critical, simply because of the volatility of election period, right? So what then that means is that Relute spoke of, certain checks that should be put in place to ensure that, the news before it goes out reaches a certain quality standard. What then election time means is that those should be more stringent. Those should be increased if at all they can be quantified. And it then also falls onto the individual actors themselves, specifically editors and journalists, with an understanding that they are now operating on with the intent to harm or the reputation or, some gain to the person who's behind that. Again, election time is a time that has the most incentive for people to want to engage in acts of disinformation through fake news, propaganda, and the like. So election time means that this information, the volatility of the situation, the emerging issues and dynamics around election time need to be more than understood by the journalists and the editors, because they will ultimately affect the extent to which they are able to do. Again, like I said, it's their everyday job, but the extent to which they can do it efficiently around that time is dependent on them understanding the dynamics of election time.
Right. Let's look at this tripartite. Citizens, the media, the editor. How are citizens able to meet these other two halfway to ensure gore ga ba iphitlhele jaanong le bone ba kuketsa CV go nna le kganya gore they are peddling misinformation, right? Ke bone ba ileng gore ka go bua ga bone, because you have to admit word of mouth is one of the fastest transmitters of information. Ga ke go bolela se ileng gore nna ke tsela gore ke boammaruri e bo le wena wa go se tlotlelo mongwe gongwe ebile ya anong re tsenya le tswainyana le tswainyana lone leo ga re lebella bobegadikgang gongwe ke lone le ileng gore le tsisa kgatlhego e rileng e leng gore ga o tlile tatswa yone e tlo nna o ntse o batla gore o no ntse o hella gone ho. Sensationalism also happens, and the like. So the citizenry, how do they meet the other two halfway? Really with the advent of social media.
Citizens are a key part in the tripartite, like you said. But what informs their importance is lack of knowledge or being knowledgeable. They can be either one of these two. And the most dangerous scenario is where they are not knowledgeable on a matter that they want to influence. Because journalists are part of these people. They use them as sources. They interview them. So this is where the subject of media literacy comes in. In fact, that's one area where I believe we as the media in Botswana have really failed our society. We've not really done enough we are going to need to collaborate. We need a lot of collaborations in Botswana. That we don't have those. We're going to need to collaborate to come up with platforms, especially in the digital space, where we could do fact checking, because it's a tool that is being adopted across the world. Just because politician A said something doesn't necessarily mean that I should just go and paste what they said without cross-checking as to whether what they said is true or not. So if you've got access to such tools, we'll be able to improve the quality of our work. I was talking to the CEO of Botswana Bureau of Standards 2 weeks back. He was telling me that it's very important that for the media in Botswana to come for ISO certification to improve the quality of the information that we disseminate. So that fact-checking tool could actually play into that as well.
Tla go botse jana ka gore o buile sengwe se neng sa nkgatla go na le dikgang tsa bo breaking news.
Yes.
And ra bona gore ga re lebella social media with the currency that is used on social media, it gets you a lot of likes. It gets people to share the content e leng gore wa e bua e be go tswella hela jalo. There's an appetite, it seems, to be the first to break the news. Maybe le go lebega ile yone tshimologo ya mathata mangwe a ileng gore re kopana le one mo nakong ya gompieno. So what's your treatment of breaking news and in general the media? How should we approach this breaking of the news in such a way that we do not put ourselves in a position whereby now we have to now retract and again go to the issue of dwindling or erosion of public trust in the institution?
The rule of thumb stays: fact check, cross check. I'll give you an example. 2 instances. The bus accident in South Africa, which was ferrying church members to some event. And one of our reporters came with some humongous number, claiming that there's an accident in South Africa, Botswana. I think she was giving some weird numbers, very large numbers. And I told him, I've seen almost all the buses. I think I'm old enough. I don't think there's a bus which will carry that number. Whether there's people standing or whatever, I don't think there's a bus that will carry that number. So let's wait. After I interacted with the reporter, I think a minute or so later, I saw it on Facebook. Some Facebook pages, this.
Yes, the citizen.
This plethora of them. They were carrying that number. And I said, we're not going to, this is why we introduced the differentiation strategy, because I don't want to be part of this lot. So we waited until we got the correct number. I think at the time we are the only publication that printed the correct number of people who were in the bus. The second scenario, may her soul rest in peace, the unfortunate passing of Lizile Tebogo's mother. It was over the weekend. One of our reporters called me to ask if we should they should go ahead and publish on the Facebook page. I said, on a balance of scale, no, don't do it. They said, no, others are already publishing. I said, no, I'll rather wait for the family statement. Yeah, I'll see how I angle the family statement to actually make it a bit more prominent, because it will be factual by then, and I think at the time the family would have been told. And I told them, I gave a reason that actually I saw Litsi at some race somewhere outside the country, so let's just respect him. Probably maybe he doesn't even know that his mother has passed on. So that's the standard that we are trying to set.
But if you're meeting those kind of people, that hot-headedness, that trigger happiness within the newsrooms, what more of the citizenry, they are operating without those parameters, without the guidelines of an editor, where Sonia, I want to talk about safeguarding the integrity of the electoral process. Gore ebe bo enna bone ba ileng gore ba tsa khanyo ka mahatla go tshwana go gore ebe go diragala ka tselentseng jang. How are we going to be significant contributors in democratic governance within these elections? Because with all these elements, so what are the first steps in ensuring that we are moving towards the safeguarding of the integrity of the electoral process?
Well, it sort of goes back to the point I said about first things first is the media being aware of what election time means. And I think as well, acknowledging the individual/human aspect of their work. That's where the issue of personal biases comes in. Because as much as Ole Relute, you are an editor, Ole Remote, you are a journalist, these issues are not happening in a space outside of yourself. You are as well a citizen. The outcome of the electoral process also affects you at an individual level. And you have a preference, one or the other, in that same, because you have a vested interest as a citizen. So you have a preference that you in terms of the outcome that you'd like to see. So on top of what I said about being aware of the landscape, being aware of the human aspect of yourself, vis-a-vis the role that you are playing in that whole foray of events. So things such as, reporting on the actual happening of the electoral process, checking your personal bias to I know that I'm a fan of candidate A or political party C, but is this story reflective of the fact that it was written by Remote, who is a supporter of party C? And Relute talked of the issue of collaboration. Now there is more it's more of the time than ever for now to be, like I said, double, triple checks of your work. You come in and you sort of admit to yourself that you are also prone to mistake. So putting your work there for your colleagues, of course not your competitors, but your colleagues to sort of have an input as well. And I think also understanding that you can't understand everything. I'll give you an example of the last elections we had in 2019, where we saw the highest number of contested outcomes than in any previous election. We had the highest number of court cases. For a lot of people, academics included, we were finding out certain issues relating to our electoral framework for the first time. But then you have certain players in the media space who then want, because they understand that their role is to inform, but they sort of want it to overcome their humanity, that they don't even want to go as far as admitting to themselves that they are also new to some of these issues. So then that affects the reporting of what is even happening in the courtroom. Just the mere relaying of information of to say this is what is happening. Candidate Sonia Gaobolai of Party X is in court, and this is what the judge said, and this is what it means. You know, we saw a lot of journalists going to the extent of wanting to interpret the law, which I think being fair to say, nobody expected that to be the job of the media. There was nothing wrong in bringing in the expert in that issue. Everybody was learning from the lawyers and the judges at that time.
Right.
So you know, there was that element of wanting to go and above and beyond,
Right.
and not acknowledging the human aspect of being prone to error, of being prone to misunderstanding, especially issues that are technical like the law, like policy frameworks.
Right. Ha ke tswa ha ke tlo ha motsotso gore o tlo o wetse yanong ka gore tsamaela ko bokhutlong jwa puisong ya rona re lute how do we get the buy-in of politicians, how do you get the buy-in of political parties ra bona gore le bone bana le seabe mo gongwe mo go iseng dikgang tse e leng gore go phatlalatseng dikgang tse e leng gore ga dina boammaaruri ka kitso ye tletseng ya gore ba irelang jalo. So how do we now get the buy-in gore re ska ra itlhelanong tsamaiso ya kana thulaganyo ya ditlhopho e na le e kgotlelesegile mo e leng gore batho le bone ba latlhegile go re imetsa morwalo re le bobegadikgang?
Thank you. Before I get into the debate or the issue about politicians and how we get that buy-in, I think it is key that we get the buy-in of the Independent Electoral Commission, because look at what is happening at the time where we're in right now. This is a critical moment for Botswana. We are going for an election, and to me it's a very critical election because for the first time in history, the development plan of the country is going to be aligned to the political cycle. So that is it's a punctuation on its own. So IECs should actually take these elections very serious and actually involve the media, the collaboration I was talking about. But as we speak today, you will find that the IEC is not even collaborating with any media house to actually ensure that there is a process in motion to doesn't push polarization, because a trusted media, a media that is unbiased, that is impartial, actually reduces the chances of a polarized society.
Relute, thank you so very much for those closing remarks. Ke go sebaka Sonia le wena o tlo wele o wela ka potso e neng re khabudisale.
I think in closing hela senka se buang ke gore I cannot emphasize enough how volatile election season is, especially where competition is high, and as such the media needs to understand that it's make or break for them at such a time, because faults on their part around election time can actually lead to the disintegration of the democratic framework of the country itself. Of course, there are negative effects anytime the media falters in its work, but faltering around election time, because it's such a hotly contested time period, it means the stakes are higher and the cost of mistakes is higher, and can be the country itself. That can be the price which we have to pay for media making mistakes, intentionally or otherwise. So in terms of engaging with the electoral period, it needs to be understood through efforts of the media themselves that there is no room for bias. This needs to be clearly communicated to the politicians, because Ghana, this is a high stakes time for them as well. And where they see an opportunity, they will swoop in and take advantage of that. So the media needs to make sure that it is communicating both overtly and covertly to political players, that the media space cannot be an avenue that is used in dubious means to further their political interests. Yeah.
Ke tsela gore re tla e wetsa ka tsela e ntseng jalo. There is no room for bias within the media space, says Sonia Atswako, Botswana Center for Public Integrity. Ke buisanya le ene a na le re Obrilute tsatsi la gompieno a tswa gone ko Weekend Post e le gape le loko la Editors Forum. And that's how we come to the end of today's discussion, which primarily was looking at the role of the media in democratic governance. Ke na tumisa mothei re tla kopana gape mo nakong e tlang on yet another episode ya Motlhophi BUA. Thank you so much.